All right, so let's talk a little bit about how to stop self-sabotage. Now, before I even jump in, I just want to be really clear that we all do this. This is not a you problem. This is something we all struggle with to varying degrees. So let's chat a little bit about how we can avoid this. So one, let's kind of distinguish what is self-sabotage. So first, it's actually not you lacking willpower or discipline. A lot of times this is what we assume, is that we are self-sabotaging because we are lacking these two things. The reality is, for most of us, it is a coping mechanism, and usually for discomfort of some kind. And so it'll look like, or it will come about due to like a reaction to perceived failure. That's a good word to kind of cling to right there. Again, it could be a way to avoid uncomfortable emotions. It also could just be a habit that we are automatically falling into. So let's chat about how we fix this. So let's look at what the self-sabotage loop looks like. So typically it will follow this pattern. Number one, there's some kind of small slip up or mistake. Okay. That will then conjure up feelings of guilt and shame and just feeling bad. That will then create this mentality of, you know what, I've already made a mistake. I might as well throw in the towel. And so then fourth, this is where we either, let's say overeat, binge, or we just quit altogether. That will automatically lead at some point to regret and then this desire to start over, which once you start over, at some point you will make some kind of mistake, feel bad about it, go into the screw it mentality and over. Now, what's important is to understand this is where the self-sabotage starts to happen. It's the mindset that says, I've already made a mistake, I might as well, and then we self-sabotage at that moment. So what we want to do is we want to fix this piece here. We're not trying to get you more perfect. We're not also, well, I would like for there to be less guilt and shame, but that sometimes is just a very ingrained response. However, through this process, you might actually end up changing how you look at those mistakes. So I do actually hope that you change the way that you respond to your mistakes, but it's really the mentality that comes out of it that I'd like for us to focus on. So here's a couple common, scenarios that we see people self-sabotage in. So you have an untracked meal for whatever reason, maybe it's just too difficult, you don't have your scale, whatever it is, but that untracked meal then leads you to kind of spiral and you're like, forget it. I'm not going to track any of my meals, right? Maybe the scale jumps up, which is very common and it is a normal part of the weight loss journey. And that might lead you to binge. Why try so hard if the scale is going to go up? And so we end up, again, self-sabotaging. Or maybe we just have a really busy day and we're unable to implement the way we wanted to. Maybe we had to go out to lunch with coworkers. Our kid was, at practice long, and so we're not going to get the dinner we expected. And so we end up giving up. So just a few common ways that we see this self-sabotage in action. Now, I find that high achievers, or a type A, struggle the most with this. And that's for a couple reasons. A lot of us, and I include myself in this category, have been trained to think if I can't do it perfectly, then I've failed, right? It's got to be one or the other. We also have this very deep connection to effort. We are very high achieving. We are very hardworking. And a lot of times we do see success out of that effort, but we have made this correlation that effort will equal success. And so we often think more is better. We also tend to see discipline as something that should override everything. We feel this compulsion that discipline is what we need. We just need to be more disciplined. And it doesn't matter what the circumstance is. It's just a need for more discipline. You can also put willpower in there as well. Okay, but here's what we need to understand. That rigid mindset ends up becoming your weakness. As much as we want it to be our strength, it ends up being our weakness. And so we actually don't need more effort. We need more flexibility. Again, we tend to see more effort as equal to more success, but it ends up breaking us in the end. So here's very quick 4 steps to help avoid self-sabotage. And the first one is very important, and that's you have to expect imperfection, which again is very difficult for a type A high achiever because we want to be perfect. But the reality is we never will be. And so we need to embrace the idea that we will make mistakes, but that's not going to stop us from being successful. So if we can just expect, yeah, I'm going to make mistakes along the way, embrace that as a learning opportunity, we will be a lot more successful, right? And able to keep going. 2, we need to interrupt that thought loop. Remember, it's the mindset, the screw it mentality that ends up being where the self-sabotage happens. So we need to interrupt that thought. So when you make a mistake, you need to give yourself a moment to kind of pause before you take the next step, which is step 3, which we'll go over in a moment. So I often will encourage clients, hey, set a timer for 10 minutes, go for a walk, go to another room. That helps tremendously just to change your environment. Do something you enjoy, something that grounds you, maybe listen to a song that makes you happy, call a loved one, journal. Again, it can be anything just to help you get out of that cycle and kind of give you a pause. Now, during that pause, you want to then make a neutral next choice. And it's really important that it's neutral and that we're just looking at, okay, what's the next best thing I can do, right? Again, we're trying to interrupt that screw it mentality. And so we want to kind of look at like, okay, well, I wasn't able to track that meal. So what can I do next? Does that, like, let me say it like this. What we're trying to do is, let's say we don't track a meal. We don't want that to become 2 untracked meals and 3 and 4 and days go by, right? And so we want to think, what's the next best thing I can do? And we want it to be neutral, meaning we don't want it to be a punishment. I don't want it to be like, well, I missed my workout, so I'm going to do double today, or I'm going to take up the intensity, or, I didn't hit my calories for the day, so I'm going to punish myself tomorrow and I'm going to reduce calories. So we want it to be neutral and just about, okay, what is the next best thing I can do to just keep myself moving forward? Again, it's not about punishment, and it's certainly not about how do I undo what I just did. And then last, we just want to focus on the next 24 hours. Us type A's, we can get really bogged down by looking at the long term, which is not a bad thing to be able to see long term. That can be overwhelming, which is kind of where this self-sabotage can happen, because we get overwhelmed thinking, well, I'm never going to hit my goal now, right? I've made this mistake, and we equal that to no success. Instead, if we could just look at, okay, can I make the next 24 hours positive? Can I make it a win? Can I get some wins in the next 24 hours? And we can just take things a little bit slower. We can kind of ease off, again, that long term for the moment to kind of help us get back into routine. That will be a lot more productive than trying to get lost in, oh my gosh, how do I offset this mistake that I have made? Now, I like this idea of the 3-10 rule. So this is a scale 1 to 10, and we're going to rate the mistake that we made. Now, a minor slip up, so that would be like a 1 to a 3. That is something that is not going to be a big deal. And what we're really trying to do is keep our slip up to a 1 to a 3. It's very easy to overcome. This is not something that's going to have, permanent or long-term consequences. It's just, it is what it is, a minor slip up. One meal you didn't track, a day that you went over calories, a missed workout. It's very minor. Now, a 4 to a 7, things are starting to compound. So maybe you missed one meal and then it becomes 2 meals and 3 meals, right? Or you went over your calories one day and now it's becoming 2, 3, 4 days. Same thing with your workouts, right? Things are starting to pile on because we're allowing the mistake to grow. And then an 8 through a 10, that's a full-on spiral. At this point, we are, we've given up, we're binging, we're completely letting go of all the reins, right? And so if we can keep our slip up to a 1 to a 3 and reset ourselves there, we're going to avoid, the consequences of things starting to compound. And then, of course, a full on spiral where, lots of damage can be done. So, if you can kind of reframe and think of your, your slip up, whatever it is, as minor, it might really help to say, okay, this is easy for me to kind of overcome. It's easy for me to kind of reset, right? And what I want to avoid is a 4 through a 10. Basically, I want to keep this minor, so it's still, something that is not going to hurt me overall. All right, so here's kind of the mentality we want. Progress. It is progress we are after, not perfection. Nobody is winning any awards for doing this perfectly. And what you want out of this process is progress anyways, right? And that's what gets you results. It's not perfection because nobody's able to do that anyways. And so if we can just put our sights on what's really important, and that's continuing to move forward, continuing to put one foot in front of the other, you will get results. You will continue to struggle if perfection, though, is what you keep on going after. So last, here's what I want to leave you with is be a skyscraper. So most people, type A's, really think that they need to be very strict. They need to be really rigid in order to be successful. But the reality is, the taller your goal, so if you have big goals for yourself, well, the more flexible you will have to be. It's like a skyscraper. The only way that a skyscraper is able to exist is because it is flexible. It also has a firm foundation that is, in fact, a deep foundation. But the skyscraper that we see has to be able to sway in the wind, otherwise it will break. And so in order for us to be successful, we too need to be able to sway and kind of move with the obstacles, the wind that goes our way, right? So being able to handle challenges without completely falling apart or self-sabotaging is the only way that we're going to be able to make progress. So with that mentality, we want to embrace flexibility instead of reject it. So keep that in mind as you move forward. Use this visual when you're navigating missteps. Try to keep that to a 1 to a 3, and you'll find you'll be so much more successful, and you'll make the actual process and journey a lot more enjoyable.